In Torah, if you see things that appear to be so similar, yet are subtly different, there's a good reason for it. We'll see that in how the Alter Rebbe teaches us the laws of brochos, whether it's in his Shulchan Aruch, which aligns with language that is similar to the Rambam's, or whether it is in his Seder Brichas Hanenin, which is part of the Siddur. In fact, there is a difference between instructions in the Siddur and instructions as they are in Shulchan Aruch, and that will play out in exactly this set of halachas. In honor from Seder Brichas Hanenin, the beginning of the order of which brochos you say over foods or experiences that a person has personal pleasure from, the Alter Rebbe tells us, the Torah mandates that we have to say a bracha after we have eaten a meal. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, that you eat and satisfy yourself, then you have to bless Hashem. Very specific language, as we'll see, because this language, which the Alter Rebbe also quotes in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, is Ginumum for Rambam Reish Hilchis Brochos, would seem to be a paraphrase of what the Rambam says at the beginning of the laws of brochos, except Zayin Abadoshinuyim in dem Lashon from Alter Rebbe Bisfarav Hanal Gabba dem Lashon Harambam. You will see certain nuances, different expressions that the Alter Rebbe uses versus what the Rambam uses, as well as differences between how the Alter Rebbe addresses these halachas in his Shulchan Aruch versus in Brichas Hanenin. Let's have a look at what those differences are. Number 1, Aleph. In Rambam, on Seder Brichas Hanenin, both the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe, when he's speaking in Seder Brichas Hanenin, says, Lashon, mitzvah aseh is a positive mitzvah levorech achar achilas mazon cholei, to bless Hashem after we have eaten. Let's compare that to the Shulchan Aruch, because there's one nuance difference. In Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe Mosef mitzvah aseh levorech es Hashem. When the Alter Rebbe talks about this in Shulchan Aruch, he says specifically not just that there's a mitzvah to bless, but he says to bless Hashem. I'm not quite sure who else we would think that we are blessing. Other distinction base. The Rambam is matik from pasuk oich dem vort uveirachta es Hashem Eloikecha. When the Rambam quotes the pasuk, which is the basis from our parasha this week of benching, he says you should bless Hashem, your God. The Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch is merames dem hemshach hapas mitten vort v'goymer. When the Alter Rebbe speaks about these halachas in the Shulchan Aruch, he doesn't say that word Eloikecha, but he does put an etc., which alludes to the fact that that word is relevant to the conversation. Whereas in Seder Brichas Hanenin, steht nor uveirachta es Hashem on v'goymer in the list of brochos. There the Alter Rebbe does not even quote the whole pasuk, nor does he put an etc. Why those differences? Now, the diuk in dem shinu b'negad dem v'goymer is noch beileter. What makes that specific distinction, whether or not there's an etc., even more acute, is in dem hemshech hasiif. When the Alter Rebbe continues the conversation, Sai in Shulchan Aruch, on Sai in Seder Brichas Hanenin, whether it be in his Shulchan Aruch or in the order of brochos, Zogt the Alter Rebbe says the following: any person that derives benefit from things of this world without first saying a bracha, it is as if the person has transgressed the prohibition against benefiting from something that belongs to Hashem. Shenemar, because everything belongs to Hashem, as the pasuk tells us, LaHashem ha'aretz u'meloya. Whatever fills the entire earth, as well as the earth itself, belongs to Hashem. And by dem din is the Ashinen afakerten oifen. Now you're going to see that the Alter Rebbe again distinguishes between the language that he uses in the Shulchan Aruch or the Seder Brichas Hanenin, but it's reversed now. In Shulchan Aruch is noch die Werte from pasuk nit moise v'goymer. This time in the Shulchan Aruch, when the Alter Rebbe quotes this pasuk, he does not put an etc. With a verachta es Hashem, he did put an etc. Or Dafka in Seder Brichas Hanenin is a yeh moise v'goymer, whereas in Seder Brichas Hanenin, where for the pasuk of verachta es Hashem, he did not put an etc. Now for the pasuk LaHashem ha'aretz u'meloya, he does put an etc. Why the distinction? Now you might think that we're nitpicking, because these are such subtle differences and really don't seem to have any major impact on what we're learning. But when you remember how precise both the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe always were with their language, particularly with regards to halacha, then you realize we've got to pay attention to these nuances, especially in our case, Alter Rebbe is Meshana Dim Lashon says Maitik for Rambam, where the Alter Rebbe is using language that is different to his original source, the Rambam. And especially when you consider that the Alter Rebbe uses different language in his Shulchan Aruch versus in his Seder Brichas Hanenin, there's no question about it that the Alter Rebbe did these things intentionally, which prompts us to work out why. What does he want us to learn with these nuances? So let's look at the first distinction that we drew between how the Rambam says that there is the mitzvah to bless and how the Alter Rebbe said that there's a mitzvah to bless Hashem. Let's explain it as follows. The Rambam sagt levorech stam. The Rambam said the mitzvah is to bless. And nit zugemedikt es Hashem. He didn't qualify that it's to bless Hashem. Why didn't the Rambam qualify? Because look at the heading of that section. The Rambam already made this clear. While in the Keseres von brochos sagt the Rambam, in the introductory headline to the section of brochos, the Rambam told us that it is mitzvah saseh achas. There's one mitzvah in this section, vehi levorech es Hashem agoda vehakodesh achar achilo, and that is to bless Hashem's great and holy name after we have eaten. So the Rambam's already told us who we are blessing. He does not have to repeat it when he quotes the pasuk. Hashem. The Rebbe after Rambam nit ibechazron zogne vorech es Hashem in gufalocha. He does not have to repeat himself. Aber frat as das ist die erste halacha von Hilchos brochos, sie kommt gleich nach der Keseres anal, especially when you consider this is the first halacha in this section. So it is immediately after the heading which said that the mitzvah is to bless Hashem. It is obvious that we're blessing Hashem. You don't have that level of clarity in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. In the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe doesn't have this introductory line to each section of the halachas, so therefore he hasn't made the statement that this is a mitzvah to bless Hashem. Therefore, that the mitzvah is to bless Hashem. Okay, that makes sense. We see the distinction. But let's ask ourselves the question, who else were you going to bless? Why do both the Rambam in his introduction and the Alter Rebbe in the actual halacha itself have to tell us that we're blessing Hashem? That is in the pasuk. A pasuk they're quoting, which is Uveirachta es Hashem. You got to bless Hashem. So what else would you think? The pasuk says bless Hashem. Why do you have to clarify for me that means bless Hashem? And if there is a reason to specify that you're blessing Hashem, why was it no longer important for the Alter Rebbe to qualify it when he gives us the list of brochos hanenin? So it seems inconsistent. In the Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe feels he needs to tell us that we have to bless Hashem. In Seder brochos hanenin, it seems that the Alter Rebbe feels he doesn't have to tell us that it's to bless Hashem. Why that distinction? So to understand that, what we first got to understand is what is the different nature of these two compilations, the Shulchan Aruch on the one hand and the Seder brochos hanenin on the other. On the one hand, we have the style and intention of the Rambam's Mishnah Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, which have similar intentions, the same intention. On Seder brochos hanenin and the order of brochos that you say over food and other pleasurable experiences, which is a different intention. The Rambam v'Shulchan Aruch, the purpose of Mishnah Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, they are both compendia of different halachas that are brought on a whole range of subjects. The Chelek is nor, was the Rambam is mekabel Torah shebal peh kula. The only difference between the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch is that the Rambam addresses all areas of halacha, including halachas which we cannot currently fulfill, like the halachas of Tumah and Tara, Beis Hamikdash, Karbonos, even the halachas of Mashiach. On the Shulchan Aruch, and halt blois the halachas v'chazayin negea bisman hazeh, whereas Shulchan Aruch only speaks about mitzvahs that are current. But the tzad hashava in zeh is as the zayin zun ev gezamot halachas. What the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch both have in common is it's a compendium of a range of different halachas. Whereas the brochos hanenin hat der Alter Rebbe eingestellt in Siddur, whereas the order of brochos for food and other things is something that the Alter Rebbe included in his Siddur. Was Siddur Vasidr koilech the halachas in siddur, the purpose of the siddur and whatever halachas might be included in the siddur, that's not a compendium of halachas. That is a list of direct instructions of things that you will be doing on a regular basis. V'mezetes in the halach hilchas netilas shachris, hilchas tzitzis v'chulei. Those are the things that appear in the siddur. Things you're going to do daily. Wash your hands in the morning. Put on tzitzis. Out of the entire range of halachas, these are the ones that the Alter Rebbe chose to include in the siddur. Das heißt, as the halachas from Seder brochos in seinen geschrieben, therefore, those halachas that apply to food or to other kinds of brochos that we have to say, they were written nit besignan limud l'shem ideas halachas. They were not written in the spirit of knowing broad halacha, nor in our signan for nerois l'maaseh b'foil. They were written in the spirit of instruction. So stand here, bow there, say these brochos. Now, once we know that distinction, that Shulchan Aruch is telling us halacha and the siddur is telling us what you need to do right now, so because they have different intentions, the language the Alter Rebbe uses in the Shulchan Aruch will be fundamentally different to the language that he uses in anything in the siddur, including brochos hanenin, because the intention is different, so you obviously illustrate your intention with different language. In Seder brochos hanenin, when it's the order of brochos that you're supposed to say, which is things that are immediate instructions, you're about to eat this food, say this brocha. So is the dir kaloshen beikut zu bewahren as die halacha soll klar herausbringen wie die Anhoge gleich al asar darf sein. The language is going to be focused on being sure that you know exactly what you need to do right now in this situation. Es ist aber nicht also in der dir kaloshen zu bewahren, was mir wird herausdringen von dem bei einer anderen Anhoge, legabe ein anderer halacha. The language will not be designed to help you know how to respond in a different case, in a different halacha. Now that's going to be really different in the Shulchan Aruch, where the intention is to bring together a whole range of different halachas. Therefore, is the dir kaloshen, the way the language of Shulchan Aruch will always work is in anofen was bavon mir soll nicht herausdringen von kein Inyan, was is nicht eisgehalten mit Shulchan Aruch. Wo es soll nicht sein. The language of Shulchan Aruch has to always be clear and concerned with, let this language not mislead you in any other area of halacha, even if it's on a different topic in a different section of Shulchan Aruch. So, the Lashon of brochos hanenin, you're about to eat an apple, say borei pri ha'etz. The Lashon of Shulchan Aruch, let's teach you about how brochos work and elements of halacha that are relevant to brochos or to other things that may dissect or cross over these subjects. We'll talk about them too. That will help us to understand from was in Shulchan Aruch is the Alter Rebbe medayik u'moisif. Now we get why the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch says it's not just levarech, a mitzvah to bless, but specifically es Hashem, to bless Hashem. On it Seder brochos hanenin lost it dosos, and he doesn't feel the need to tell us that detail in Seder brochos hanenin. Why? Because there is a klal, generally speaking, we know as the word es b'Torah shebechsav. If you have the word es in a pasuk in Torah, which by the way is abaklal nit b'Torah shabal peh, this principle will not apply to the word es in Mishnah, Gemara, etc. Torah shabal peh. In fact, it may even work in reverse. But in the Torah, if the word es is in a pasuk, is aribo, it comes to include other things that are not stated explicitly in the pasuk. Great example, the Gemara derives from the pasuk that says, Es Hashem you should fear. The Rabbi Talmidei Chachamim that it means that you have to be in awe of Torah scholars as well, not only of Hashem directly. The Es includes other things that were not explicitly stated. The same thing in our pasuk, the fact that the Torah says after you've eaten and satisfied yourself, you should bless Es Hashem. That extra word Es comes to teach us what? Is the word Es Ariboy, Versteht in Rishonim. So Rishonim quote that this word Es is there to teach us an additional halacha, which is that the person who has eaten should also bless the balabais who hosted him. On the Rebbe's halacha which is why the practical halacha is, if you're a guest at somebody's table, you should be the one to lead the benching so that you could extend a bracha in the benching to the balabais. That is something derived from the word es. Therefore, muss der Alter Rebbe b'Shulchan medayek sein. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch, which looks at a broader picture of halacha, not only the immediate halacha that we're discussing right now, therefore he has to address that the mitzvah we're talking about here is the positive mitzvah the Torah mandates to bless Hashem, to shelel zayin atos. Here the Alter Rebbe wants to ensure that we don't mistakenly believe as the mitzvah that there is a Torah mandated requirement to bless the balabais, even though it is something that we will derive out of the word es. So the Alter Rebbe needs us to know, because the style of Shulchan Aruch is to make sure you know all the halachic ramifications of this particular law. So know that the halachic ramifications do not include a Torah-based responsibility to bless the balabais. Mashenkin and Siddur brochos hanenin, whereas in the section where he just tells us which brochos we're supposed to say over food, or other things that we have pleasure from, where the intention is just to tell you the instruction of what you need to be doing right now in this situation. You don't need the extra words to tell you bless Hashem, because the pasuk says you should bless Hashem, and we're not going to use Siddur brochos hanenin as the launch pad to analyze the word es. Besides the fact that it is fairly logical to know that if you're thanking and blessing for food, you're thanking and blessing Hashem for your food. So bringt gleich dennoch in Siddur brochos hanenin den pasuk uverachtes Hashem, which also explains why the Alter Rebbe immediately quotes the pasuk, because that will give us the context, just in case we didn't get it, that the mitzvah is to bless Hashem. If we can take it a step further, in Siddur brochos hanenin wird nicht gebracht dem den heurech mevorach deishe vorach lebalabais. The halacha that calls on a guest to bench so he could bless the balabais does not appear anywhere in Siddur brochos hanenin. Over mele darf man nicht behavornen in Siddur brochos hanenin dem tosanal. So therefore, this compilation, this particular book, is not the place where you have to be concerned that somebody will misunderstand which brocha we're referring to, because there's only one brocha mentioned in this compilation, and that's to bless Hashem. As a mitzvah in our Torah is nit kel brocha lebalabais, you don't have to now explain to me that the Torah doesn't require me to bless my host. Mashenkin in Rambam, v'Shulchan Aruch hat Morazokin, wo der din verjo gebracht, whereas both the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch do address that halacha elsewhere in their compendium. Therefore, they have to explain that here, when we say Overachtes Hashem, it's specifically Hashem and not anybody else. Noch a Chelek zwischen dem Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch und Siddur brochos hanenin, was kommt heraus von dem Chelek Hanal Sif Gimel. Now we'll look at another distinction based on the language difference, because of the different intentions of the Siddur brochos hanenin versus the Shulchan Aruch. So we'll also explain in them from Tamei halachos whether or not, or how we talk about the reasons behind mitzvahs. The Chiddush from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, legabei dem Shulchan Aruch from Beis Yosef, as we well know, the great innovation of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch compared to the original Shulchan Aruch is was sagt milse betaima, is that the Alter Rebbe proposes a halacha and then gives the reason for it. Halacha is betamein. Mashenkin the halachas in Siddur seinen blois piske hanogas benegel meiser bepoil. Whereas in the Siddur, which includes Siddur brochos hanenin, there's no explanation of the reasons or motivations behind the mitzvahs. We're just told, this is the mitzvah, this is how you do it. Yes, there are some places where the Alter Rebbe will insert a very brief reason behind a mitzvah in the Siddur. As a Chelek zwischen dem Shulchan Aruch and Morazokin and sein Siddur, there's still a great distinction between the Shulchan Aruch and the Siddur, namely, the Alter Rebbe hat eingestellt Tamei halachos in Shulchan Aruch kidei so soll nicht sein ad derech mevalei olam. The reason that the Alter Rebbe included reasons for the halachos in the Shulchan Aruch is that we shouldn't have a situation of what the Gemara criticizes, the person who can destroy the world by misunderstanding halacha. What the Alter Rebbe wants is that we should know the reason behind mitzvah so that we understand those halachas properly and therefore do not cause mayhem by rendering the wrong halachic decision. So in Shulchan Aruch, he's going to give us that backstory, even if it's really brief. Mashenkin and Siddur Siddur brochos hanenin, whereas in the Siddur, which includes the list of brochos, which, as we've discussed, is all about just giving practical instructions. If there are any reasons included, they are if there's a reason given, it's not so that we understand thoroughly the backstory of this mitzvah, it's so we know better how to perform the instruction we're being given. Machen Geschmacker mit mehr Kavone, Chayes v'cholei. Maybe it will make it more pleasurable, accessible, enthusiastic for us. When we bring them tam halacha bekitzer, as you actually see, go look through the Siddur and you'll see that there's certain examples where what we're told about it will just heighten our enthusiasm to do the mitzvah. It's not to give us that kind of insight and explanation so that we don't misunderstand or misconstrue halacha. With that information, we can now also see another important distinction between how the Alter Rebbe words things in Shulchan Aruch versus the Siddur, or Seder Brichas Hanenin. In Shulchan Aruch, the goal of Shulchan Aruch, we said, was what? With Alter Rebbe bringt die Time halacha sieben in Yediyah Kanal. With Alter Rebbe not only tells us the halacha, but he also wants to tell us the understanding of why this halacha is relevant, so we have a better knowledge and appreciation of what the mitzvah is. Bringt die psukim from vanim lent up the halachas. Part of the method that Alter Rebbe uses to explain the meaning behind a mitzvah will often include quoting a pasuk that describes that particular halacha. That's exactly what's happening in our case. The Alter Rebbe wants to tell us that there's a pasuk which is the reason we bench after we eat. What's the pasuk? Why is he quoting the pasuk? So we have a better understanding of what this mitzvah is and why we do it. Because the Alter Rebbe's intention is to give us a better understanding of why we do this mitzvah of benching after we eat, he includes the etc. once he quotes that pasuk. Weil in der yedias limud birchas hamazon min haTorah is nagel, because if I am learning about the mitzvah to bench as the Torah formulates it, what's relevant is nit nor diverto veirachta es Hashem. It's not enough for me to know that I have an obligation to bless Hashem, nor oich de hemshech hakosuf. Actually, have to know the rest of the pasuk. What's the rest of the pasuk? Not just Hashem Eloikecha, even beyond that too. But the Alter Rebbe bringt up b'Shulchanoi, as the Alter Rebbe will tell us later on in his Shulchan Aruch. What would he tell us? As from the Verta al ha'oretz ha'tova, part of the pasuk includes that we have to bless Hashem not only for the food, but also for the beautiful land that He gave us, and that's going to have a lachic import. Because from that, that tells us that the Torah mandates that part of how we bless Hashem after a meal must include a blessing for Eretz Yisrael and specifically for Yerushalayim. The Alter Rebbe is hinting already in advance to that principle by giving us an etc., saying there's going to be more in this pasuk that's going to be relevant to halacha, because it's the Shulchan Aruch where I want you to know everything that you need in order to understand fully the mitzvah and all the details associated with it. Mashenkin in Rambam. Now the Rambam doesn't have the same approach. The Rambam doesn't go into that detail that you've also got to include a brocha for Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, steht nor uverachtes Hashem Elokecha on hisafas v'gomer. The Rambam's not going to use the word etc. because he doesn't need to draw our attention at this point to that halacha. Because at that point, the Rambam's focus is that there's a brocha to bless Hashem, thank Him for the food. The part of the pasuk that's relevant to that is only uverachtes Hashem lekecha, end of quote. But when the Alter Rebbe is writing in his Siddur, or in our context, in Seder Brichas Hanenin, if the Alter Rebbe was going to include a reason behind a mitzvah, it would only to be so that we would have a clear idea of how we're supposed to do the mitzvah, is nit nagat to bring in the psukim. We don't need these psukim. And yet, in this case, we do see that Alter Rebbe quotes the pasuk. Why? Because this pasuk will define the parameters which, being the reason behind the mitzvah, will actually clarify how we do the mitzvah. It will help us do the mitzvah with much more enthusiasm and appreciation. How so? The ged of a time for Brichas Hamazon is, as we well know, what's the reason that we bench? You eat and you satiate yourself, and then you bless Hashem. Because the person is feeling satisfied, for that you've got to thank Hashem. So now I understand, not only should I go through the words by rote, but I should appreciate the fact that Hashem has given me what I need to satiate myself. Therefore, my benching will be enthusiastic. And that also turns into an introduction into how we're supposed to view all the brochos associated with personal pleasure. That if a person would partake of this world, anything that this world has to offer, without acknowledging Hashem, it would be like a form of me'ilah, taking advantage of something that belongs to holiness, to Hashem. Because we're describing a scenario where we're about to take pleasure from something that is God's. We have to say a brocha first, which is similar to benching. Because I've been satisfied from the world, I have to bench. Likewise, similarly, if I'm going to benefit at any degree from the world, I have to first say a brocha. And that's why the Alter Rebbe does not put an etc. when he quotes that pasuk. Because the rest of the pasuk is actually not relevant. Certainly not the part about blessing for Eretz Yisrael, because that's not part of our conversation. Even the word Elokecha is not relevant to knowing that I've got to bless Hashem. What's the key part that's relevant? V'savata, the fact that I was satisfied. That tells me the context. Don't enjoy this world without acknowledging Hashem. Actually, that word elekecha, not only is it not essential to knowing how the brocha works, actually the word elekecha relates to another teaching which is against what the Alter Rebbe wants to clarify is the purpose of benching. Why do you bench? Because you had so much benefit from this world. Why do you say a bracha? Because you're going to benefit from this world. What does Elekecha teach us? That sometimes you have to bless Hashem even when it's not so enjoyable. Steht in Tosefta, as von Elekecha l'shoin dayon necha, so Tosefta teaches us that the word Elekecha, which is related to the word Elokim, right? Elokim lo yisakalel, Elokim nitza badaskel. We know that Elokim is a name that is associated with judgment or judges. Says that Tosefta lent manop shekeshem shatem mevorach ala teva kachatem mevorach ala hara, that we have an obligation to bless Hashem even for misfortune, as we do for good fortune. Bechol din, there's the word shedoncha bein midas atova midas apuranus. However, the Eibusha judges us, whether it be in a way that is positive or whether it be in a way which is misfortune, we have to bless Hashem. Was das ist hefech von brichas hamazon und brichas hanenin v'chazayin auf sfias v'anoasaguf. It's the exact opposite of benching or saying a bracha over food, which is all about having pleasure and enjoyment from the world. And the word Elekecha alludes to the fact that we have to bless Hashem even when life is painful. Und der Vergleich zum Mevorach ala Teva is not in dem likubelinu b'simcha. And the fact that we say you bless Hashem for the negative, like the positive, is just to teach us the principle that we should accept joyously whatever Hashem sends our way. But the Alter Rebbe in Birchas Hanenin only wants us to know the practical, say a bracha. And then he adds to it, v'savata, why you should be enthusiastic about the bracha, or why you should appreciate that you have to say a bracha before you eat, because it's pleasure to you. Elokecha is going to take us on the opposite track, doesn't belong in this compilation. Now that we know this major distinction between the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and its style and intention versus Birchas Hanenin and the Siddur, we'll also see the last part of what goes on next in the conversation and how it's different than the Shulchan Aruch and the Birchas Hanenin. What's next? But I'm bringing them pasuk Hashem Haaretz Loya Kenal Sif Aleph, as we noted before. In both cases, the Alter Rebbe quotes the Hashem Haaretz Loya as the proof that you're not allowed to enjoy anything from this world without acknowledging Hashem first. Yet in Birchas Hanenin he put an etc. and not in the Shulchan Aruch. Why? Even though we previously mentioned that the Shulchan Aruch is really where you have to be conscious of, if I say something here, might you misunderstand another halacha elsewhere, and we're not so worried about that in Birchas Hanenin. Is aber the bavornish is in the halacha v'anhaga lasar hoyne behefech. But in this particular case, about not enjoying the world without first acknowledging Hashem, actually we're more concerned that you'll get it wrong in Birchas Hanenin than in the Shulchan Aruch. Why? Seder Birchas Hanenin v'asis hirois lemai says, we've already noted, the purpose of Seder Birchas Hanenin is that you should that you should know how to do things. So it is possible to discuss something which is self-evident. We'll discuss something self-evident to be sure that you follow the instructions in the way that you should. In other words, that your practical application will be correct. Mashekin in Shulchan Aruch is the Lashon bekitzer und es steht nicht azach was is moving mi atzmoi. Interesting. The Shulchan Aruch will sometimes be succinct and avoid saying something which is self-evident because it's self-evident. But in brochos hanenin, we want to make sure you know exactly how to do what you're supposed to do, and that might even include mentioning something which is apparently self-evident. Und therefore, is inside brochos hanenin moisif. That's why in brochos hanenin, the Alter Rebbe says not only Hashem but he adds v'gomer and etc. Why? Das is moisif bir ba'alocha, because that helps to make it much more clear for us as kol hanenim in olam hazeh, that any person who has any degree of benefit from things of this world, ke'ilu nenem mikotche shamayim, it is akin to having something that belongs to Hashem, because everything belongs to Hashem. That means it's beyond just the things that are on the list of brochos. Anything that a person may participate in or enjoy in this world belongs to Hashem. Was das as ganz Elam Hase belangt zum Eibishten is mefeirat, hat gesagt in der Hemshach HaKosef Tevel v'Yeshveva. The principle that every single thing on the planet, every single thing that exists belongs to Hashem is not clear in the first words Hashem Aretzum Loya. It's spelled out in the continuation of the pasuk Tevel v'Yeshveva, which basically means all of existence. You could interpret Lashem ha'aretz, which land? The land of Israel. That's Hashem's land. It's a holy land. That's a place where you've got to be super conscious of acknowledging Hashem. And in Hemshach HaPasuk kommt zu. The rest of the pasuk explains it out. That all of earth and the entire universe and beyond is Hashem's, including its inhabitants. Therefore, when you have that additional information of the pasuk, that not only the holy land of Israel belongs to Hashem and has to be treated in a holy way, but everything on earth and beyond belongs to Hashem and has to be treated in a holy way, that helps clarify for us. And I feel when the Michael gehört zu zweiten Menschen, and I feel it's it helps to clarify that even if this food I'm about to have isn't mine, it's somebody else's, maybe even that other person's non-Jewish. Is das kilunenemi kotche shamayim? If I take this product and I use it without acknowledging Hashem, it is like Mila. You'd say, but what do you mean? It's a non-Jewish person's food. How can you consider it as if I'm trespassing on Hashem's personal property? Everything is Hashem's. On the farmers that has a direct instruction, which is the purpose of brochos hanenin. Direct instruction is you always say a brocha over anything that you participate in, as mandated in these halachas, regardless of whether the item belonged originally to you or to somebody else, even a non-Jewish person.